Welcome to the With Clarity and Purpose podcast with your host, Yanet Borrego. Each week, I bring you an inspiring person or message to empower you to live life on your terms so you can be who you want to be, do what you are meant to do, and have the life you deserve to have. We will provide you with practical and cutting-edge approaches to continue getting clarity and direction on your path, mastering your mindset, and gaining confidence to tap into your inner wisdom so you can live on purpose. If you're seeking to boost your clarity in any decision you have been wanting to make or any situation that you're going through and you keep asking yourself, is this the right decision for me? Is this the right approach for me? Even, is this the right path for me? I want you to go right now to my show notes because I have prepared a free and simple 3 questions framework for you to go through that by answering these questions, I promise you'll feel a lot more clearer and you'll start creating fulfilling outcomes out of the decisions you're making. Just go right now, or you can go to ybcoaching.com/clarity. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to another episode of the With Clarity and Purpose podcast, and I appreciate you so much for tuning in again. I'm so grateful for you, and I hope you're having an amazing week. I'm recording this episode in the first week of April, and let me tell you, March was such a busy month. And when I look back at the month of March and even at the beginning of April, there was this trend, there was this message that kept appearing for me, it kept popping up. And the message was going back to where everything started. And let me explain what this means. Few months back, my husband and I, Cody, we were planning our next vacation, and he wanted to go to Southeast Asia, which I've never been there before, but he actually took 1 year off from work before he met me, and he traveled around Southeast Asia. He traveled in Latin America for 4 months. He took just a whole year and traveled around, and he speaks highly of Southeast Asia, and I've been wanting to go for a while too, but I just felt this calling to going back to where it felt more like home to me. I mean, my husband is from Dallas, so home to him is really close to where we live here in Houston, Texas. My home, it's just interesting because I was born in Cuba. I lived there until I was 9 years old. Then from there, I moved to Mexico City, lived 3 years there. And then my mom and I lived 12 years in Puerto Rico. So home for me was more of the island vibe, of the Caribbean vibe. And I told him, hey, baby, I really want to go to a place that feels more like home. Because I used to go back to Cuba to visit my family once a year. But 2 years back, my uncle passed away from cancer and my grandma passed away few months after him. And even though my dad lives there in Cuba still, we don't have such a close relationship like I had with my uncle and grandma. So I just needed to go back to a place that felt like a grounding place for me to go back home. And that place was Puerto Rico for me. Why? Because I lived there 12 years. And honestly, I hadn't been back in Puerto Rico since 2018. I really don't have family there, but I do have friends from high school. And Puerto Rico is such a magical place. My mom and I went through so much there. It taught us so many lessons. I studied chemical engineering there, and it prepared me so well to enter the workforce, right, in a huge oil and gas company with an amazing salary, amazing benefits. So I'm just so grateful for Puerto Rico as a place, love the culture, love the people. And of course, my accent, even though I'm Cuban, honestly, when you hear me talk, like a lot of the accent is Puerto Rican, from Puerto Rico. So we just agreed to go to Puerto Rico, and we went last week, and I had just so much fun. And I keep telling my friends, in 1 week of being there, I explored so much more than 12 years when I was actually living in Puerto Rico. And there are so many reasons, right? The main reason is my mom and I, we were in survival mode. We literally arrived in Puerto Rico after asking for political asylum because my mom decided she didn't want to go back to Cuba because she wanted more freedom, more opportunities for me, you know, following the American dream. And we arrived there with zero resources. And my mom had an uncle that he helped us at the beginning, but we didn't arrive. I mean, we didn't have any network other than my mom's uncle. We didn't have any money, any resources. It was just, when I look back at this experience and I look at my mom, which I have the fortune of seeing her every day because she lives with my husband and I just feel this immense gratitude for the courage that she had so I could have the opportunities I have nowadays. And not only that, she sacrificed every single thing she had for us to be able to pursue the American dream. So it was just, those 12 years were a lot of survival for us, of figuring things out, of me as a child in many ways leading myself because she didn't know better, right? She was new to all this system, the American system. She was new to everything, just like myself. So I had to acquire a lot of responsibility earlier on, which is honestly a lot of people's stories, right? A lot of immigrant stories. And in those 12 years, it was a lot of ups and downs, even though at that moment I didn't look at it that way. But it was a lot of survival. It was a lot of challenges that we had to face and overcome. And it was so magical just to go back to the place where I spent 12 years and to stand in the ground and to be able to see it from a different perspective than the one I had like 10, 12, 15 years ago. And that's why this podcast episode, it's all about connecting back to your roots with an empowered perspective. And I added the empowered perspective because so many times it is common, based on my coaching practice and based on the many people that I've taught and coached and mentored, it is very common to look at your past with a feeling of sometimes feeling remorseful or feeling shame or feeling bad about where you came from or feeling that you don't want to go back. You don't want to face that again. I remember when I started working on corporate, it had been 12 years since my mom and I went back to Cuba to see our family. So literally my dad, my uncle, and my grandmother, they saw me when I was 12 years old and when I was 24 years old. So there was a gap of 12 years when we didn't get to see our family because my mom was afraid to go back, right, naturally, to Cuba. But not only that, she had so much remorse and so much hate into the place that she came from that she didn't want to face it again. And I finally convinced her to go back because I was like, Mom, when I start in corporate, I'm going to have 10 days of vacation. That's it. If we don't go now and spend more than a week with our family, it's gonna be really hard to happen once I start. And she finally agreed and everything went really well. I mean, we felt safe, everything was fine, and we were able to see our family. And I'm saying this because there is so much power for you to going back to where you started, for you to going back to the place where you struggled, where you faced so many challenges, when there are times of highs and lows, and to be able to go back with a different perspective, with the perspective of now when I look at the big picture, I realize how the dots connect in order to support me to where I am right now. And I remember this very challenging time in my childhood where my mom, she lost her job, and for 2 years she was unemployed. And I mean, she was the only source of income we had. And honestly, she wasn't earning that much, to be honest with you. Like when she tells me how much she earns, how much she was earning back then, I'm like, no way. I mean, that doesn't make even sense, right? So she lost her salary, and thankfully I had landed an internship with a big oil and gas company in Minnesota. I remember St. Paul Park, Minnesota. And I was being paid really well. You know, chemical engineers, even in internships, we get paid really well. And I remember using that money to pay the rent, to pay every single expense that we had, right? Just being really young. And now I look back and I'm just so grateful for everything that we went through in order to get the lessons we needed to get. And so many times the lessons come in form of challenges, right? Come in form of problems, challenges, whatever label you want to use. And whenever we are going through the challenges, we don't feel like there is a purpose. But when you zoom out into the bigger picture of life, the bigger picture of the story that you're living, you realize how much more sense those challenges had. So going back was really powerful. Why? Because I was able to see my whole life story, at least those 12 years that I was there, through a different lens, through a more empowered lens, through a lens of a lot of gratitude, a lot of compassion, you know, for my mom, for myself, for everyone that we interacted with, a lot of love. And this is something you can do for yourself, right? You can have this exercise of just going back to where everything started. Maybe it is your home, maybe it is a high school, a college, whatever place that carries meaning to you, maybe a place where you felt challenged, or a place that sometimes you don't want to face because you have built a lot of resentment. Part of this journey of life is to let go of that resentment and operate from a place of forgiveness. And sometimes people don't understand that forgiveness, it doesn't have to do anything with the other people. Forgiveness is all about ourselves, about realizing that we need to let go of the past, because holding on to the past and holding on to that resentment is not helping us. It's doing the opposite. It's damaging our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual state. So in order for you to move lighter, you gotta let go from that resentment. You gotta forgive. You gotta feel compassion for even the people that hurt you at times. Because I truly believe that everyone, including ourselves, we are doing the best we can with the resources we have. And sometimes it's not about other people. Sometimes it's about forgiving ourselves for showing up differently. But again, you, my friend, were doing the best you could with the resources you had at that moment. So I would encourage you to pick a place or pick a situation or pick a person and face this person or this situation from a loving and compassionate place. I also had this weekend one of my friends from my first corporate employer, when I graduated with my bachelor, she was retiring and she invited me to her. It was like a barbecue, kind of like a place. It was in a place where they serve barbecue, alcoholic drinks, everything else. And I went, and it was the same pattern of going back to my roots where everything started. I mean, that first corporate employer, oh my God, I learned so much about myself through highlights, but many challenges too, right? Many painful moments, mainly at the beginning of my corporate career, where I really needed to work on my confidence. I needed to work on clarity. Who do I want to be? The first time I asked myself that question, and I wouldn't have done it if I wouldn't have started in that company. So I was so happy because I got to see many people that I hadn't seen in 4 years, which is when I left that corporate employer. And me being there in that environment, that was when I first started, with different people, a lot of them that helped me along the way. It was such a healing process too, of going back to where everything started. So literally in March, I went back to Puerto Rico, where I started many things and where I faced many challenges. And it was such a healing journey. And I also went back to an event from my first corporate employer, where I learned so much about myself. And a lot of those learnings disguised as challenges, disguised as, lack of fulfillment, lack of clarity, but at the same time, so grateful for everyone who helped me along the journey and for all the lessons I learned. And also, funny enough, later this month on April, I'm going to give a speech to the first company where I had my first interview ever. And I was a baby when this happened. I mean, I don't remember the exact year, but it had to be like 2009. I think I was on the second year of my chemical engineering degree. And I remember coming back to the mainland, because the first time I stepped into the mainland was when we asked for political asylum in the Laredo, Texas border. But that was like 2 days, that's it. And I remember coming back to the mainland now for an interview, a job interview. And I wasn't even speaking fluid English, to be honest with you. But I always had this vision that I needed to push the boundaries of what I knew. I needed to get myself into an uncomfortable zone. And out of everyone, we were like a group of maybe 60 to 100 people. I don't remember very well. And everyone was interviewing for these internships. And I was the only one from Puerto Rico. Everyone else was from the mainland. And I remember feeling so fearful and uncomfortable, but the interview went so well. And I ended up doing, I did 3 summer internships with this company and 1 co-op, which is 1 semester, just working with them. And I learned so much. And now at the end of this month, I'm going to give a speech there, which is crazy because that was another place where everything started, with my corporate journey, which led me to my entrepreneurship journey started. So grateful for everything that has happened in this last month and a half. And as I was thinking about it, I was like, I'm sure everyone that listens at the podcast, because I know if you're listening to this podcast, you're seeking to grow more. You're seeking to contribute, to make an impact in this society, right? Growth and contribution. That's part of your DNA. And I was thinking, everyone who listens at this podcast, just sharing this message of going back to your roots, going back to the place or the person or the event where everything started, and looking at it from a different perspective can be so healing in this journey of self-discovery. And remember, showing up with forgiveness, right? If you decide to go back, show up with forgiveness, letting go of the past, and looking back at it from a mindset of celebration, from a mindset of reflecting on how far you have come in order to be where you are right now. All of the things that you had to go through in order to get the lessons so you could move forward with more clarity or purpose. And be thankful. Be thankful for all the lessons you have gone through. And also gives you an opportunity to just have a big picture perspective, just to zoom out and see how every single challenge served a purpose. Because whenever we are going through pain, through challenging times, we are so zoomed in to the scenario, into the challenge, that we don't see the bigger purpose that challenge serves us. So just going back and looking at everything through the eyes of healing and transformation can be really powerful. And also reflect. Reflect on your past while you celebrate, because if you are like me, you're very driven and you're always thinking of the next thing or what you could have done better. And it is also important to look back to celebrate how far you have come, and just do that. Celebrate. We gotta celebrate more of who we are. We gotta celebrate more of where we have come from, because it's so important. I hope this episode was powerful for you. I hope you take the exercise of going back to a place that carries a lot of meaning seriously, because I think this can bring so much healing for yourself and the people around you. And I want to leave this episode with a quote that I heard while I was listening one of my favorite spiritual teachers, Dr. Wayne Dyer. He passed away a few years back, but I still listen to many of his videos because he's amazing. And every time I listen at him talk, he's just talking to my soul, Dr. Wayne Dyer. And in one of his speeches, he gave this quote from T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot is a poet. Well, was a poet, but his art still lives, even though he doesn't. But his quote is really powerful, and it goes in alignment with the message of today's podcast episode. Let me read this quote because it is amazing. We shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of all exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. What a profound quote. We shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. That's exactly how I felt when I went back to Puerto Rico. That's exactly how I felt when I went back to that retirement event that I'm talking about. And I'm sure that's how I'm gonna feel when I give my speech, my corporate speaking engagement at the end of the month, is being able to go back to that first place where everything started. And because you have a bigger perspective, you have a more empowered perspective, to be able to look at it from fresh eyes and know that place for the first time. Because now you have a new perspective, you'll be able to see it with a set of fresh eyes, with a new perspective. I hope this podcast episode was super empowering for you. And again, looking back and just facing that place where you come from can be really healing in this journey, my friend. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening at With Clarity and Purpose. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Sharing is caring. Please share with your friends and family so we can continue building an empowered community together. I'll see you next week.